Hi folks, it's Mrs. Culver and we're here to do a review of kingdoms and domains. So you all know that there are 4 criteria that biologists use to decide what domain or kingdom to put living organisms in, right? So you also know that there are 3 domains, right? And they are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. That is the eukaryotes, right? So, our first domain bacteria. I've got 3 samples for you, 3 examples, okay? I've got blue cheese. The blue in this blue cheese is actually caused by bacteria. The bacteria are what give blue cheese its distinctive flavor. This is yogurt. And milk will turn into yogurt when it is eaten by any of 4 particular bacteria, all of which are very, very good for you. The most famous one, the one most people know, is the lactobacillus bacterium. It's really good to have these in your gut, and that's why they say you should eat yogurt. Okay. And I have Gold Bond foot powder. Why do I have Gold Bond foot powder? Because when your sneakers stink, they stink because of all the dead bacteria in the waste that those bacteria have left in your shoes. Okay, so what makes bacteria bacteria? They are prokaryotes. Their cells have no nuclei, no organized nuclei, no other organelles either. And they are unicellular. They consume food. They don't make their own food. Right? And they reproduce asexually with one parent. They just make copies of themselves. Okay? So that's our first domain. Our second domain, when you look at those 4 characteristics, it's exactly the same. They're prokaryotes, no nuclei. They are unicellular. They have only one cell. They reproduce with one parent. They reproduce asexually, and they consume food. But these are the folks that are called archaea, which means really old. Which means old. What makes them different from bacteria is that they can live in very, 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 very hot places and very, 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 very cold places where no other living organisms can survive. So, the most famous archaea, that should be better, the most famous archaea live in places like hot springs, and in the right next to or on the ocean vents on the floor of the ocean, where it's incredibly hot because, of course, there's magma there, right? Then there are some halophiles who live in places like the Arctic. Why are they able to live like this? Because the proteins in their cells are a little bit different than the proteins in bacteria cells or in the cells of any other living organisms. The proteins, certain proteins in their cells, allow them to perform the functions of life in these incredibly hot and cold places. Okay? Now we have to move. We have to move so that we can look at domain eukarya. Okay, so let's go out and look at domain eukarya. Okay, we're going to eukaryote land, right? Where every single organism has nuclei in their cells. Who's this? This is Doris the cat. She's running away. She is a great example of an organism in domain eukarya. She's an animal. Okay, but I'd like to start with some other folks. Let's And here we go. That's a watering can, and it's got some water in it, and it's been sitting out there for a few days. What does that have to do with eukaryotes? Well, it's been sitting out there for a few days, so my guess is that right about now it's got some protists in it. That water probably is full of protists, maybe some little paramecia, stuff like that, right? Protists, right? They're, of course, because they're eukarya, they have nuclei, but they're unicellular. They consume food, and they reproduce with one parent. They reproduce asexually. Right near here, we use the watering can to water plants, right? So that's a plant, obviously, and it is multicellular, right? Of course, it's a eukaryote. It reproduces sexually, and it makes its own food. Doris the cat, whom we'll probably never find again, because she's probably gone running away from our camera. She's an animal. Okay, she's an animal. She's a eukaryote. Her cells have nuclei. Okay, she's multicellular. You can tell that because she's pretty big. Okay, she does not make her own food. She consumes food. Okay, and she reproduces sexually. It takes two parents to make a Doris the cat. Okay, and last but not least are the fungi. We're going to go back inside and take a look at my favorite fungus. Oh, there's another cat, another animal. Yay, my favorite fungus. Yeast. This is what you need to make bread, of course, right? So, yeast is a fungus. It's it is multicellular. Of course, its cells have nuclei because we are in domain eukarya. Okay. Fungi can reproduce sexually or asexually, and they feed on other stuff. They do not make their own food, right? What makes bread rise is when yeast feeds on some of the chemicals in the flour,
namely sugar.
Thank you. And then one of its waste products is CO2 gas. And that's what makes the bread rise, that gas, that buildup of that gas. Okay? So there we are. There's our review. 3 domains, bacteria and archaea. And those 2 domains, those first 2 domains are all prokaryotes. And then our third domain is domain eukarya. We have 4 kinds of eukaryotes, and they are protists, fungi, plants, and animals. And we divide the world of living organisms up into these things on the basis of whether their cells have nuclei, how many cells they have, whether they make their own food or consume food, and how they reproduce. And you should be able to tell the difference between certain kingdoms and between kingdoms and domains on the basis of key differences in those characteristics. For example, the only thing that separates plants and animals, plants can make their own food, animals can't. All right, so there's our review of domains and kingdoms. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.